Welcome to the Great Path Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Tony B. Today, we are going to dig into part two of my special two-part series on the Force. Now, of course, for those who have been listening, part one was with Adam Walton. We discussed the living force, which was more about living in the moment and trusting your instincts. Today, I've got a special guest, Brandon Handley of Spiritual Dope, and we are going to talk about the Unifying Force. Before we get into what that is, Brandon, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hey Tony, how you doing today? Thanks for having me. So Brandon Handley, host of Spiritual Dope podcast. Since you did have Adam on, Adam and I go way back, and he's the one who gave me the term "voice of a generation" when I started my first podcast. So, Brandon Handley, voice of a generation, here to speak with you. Like I said, come from a platform where I focus a lot on, kind of spirituality, people that are going into it for the first time, kind of like awakening experiences, how to kind of enter into that without losing your mind and without freaking out. Or if you're freaking out, man, then reach out to me so I can help you kind of, couch that landing and or set it up for people who are trying to cultivate an awakening experience, or just so that they're more prepared for when they do get there. And then, in the end, it's like, hey, how do I use all this? All right, now it's like, great, I'm spiritual now. What's up? And then it's like, okay, so what? Now what do you want to do with that? Right. And how, so now the question becomes, how do I integrate this newfound sense of self into like everything that I see, so that I'm more successful, so that I'm having a greater impact on the world around me, so that, like, I mean, you're able to be the change, as it were.
And
So
I
that's
think,
what's up.
and that honestly is why I wanted you specifically for this episode. So, obviously, I've mentioned Jeremy Todd a lot. He was he was my coach. He was kind of the guy who got me into this. And it was a episode you were on his podcast, and I was listening to it, and immediately sent him an email real quick, and I was like, hey, hook me up with Brandon Hanley. At some point, I'm going to do an episode on the Unifying Force, and this is the guy. And so anyway, for those who are listening who are not familiar with what the Unifying Force is, so the Force has many aspects. We're focusing simply on the two for this two-part series, but the Unifying Force is this overall, it's the wide-angle lens, if you will, of what the Force is. So the Unifying Force, it's thought to be present in all shining stars. It surrounds them, penetrates them, connects everything in the universe. When people talk about the Force in the Star Wars sense, they're most of the time referring to the Unifying Force. I can't remember the exact quote in the movies, but they talk about how the Force penetrates us, binds us, draws us all together. We're all really part of the same whole. Big proponents of the Unifying Force theory were Master Yoda. He was probably the most famous. Ironically, for those who don't realize this, actually Emperor Palpatine, the quote unquote bad guy of the Star Wars universe, was actually a believer in the Unifying Force theme. He saw the Force as one whole. He didn't really see it as a light or a dark, which is a common theme because the Force is the Force. And people get, and it's a lot like religion, people get very dogmatic views where, this is good and this is bad, as opposed to it's all part of the whole. Palpatine realized it was all part of the whole. The only real distinction he drew is he believed that the Sith saw the Force as a means to an end, the Jedi saw the Force as the end itself. And that was the huge distinction between the two. Another thing to kind of differentiate it from the living Force is the Unifying Force. They're always looking to the future. They're always looking for how everything is connected. They're not so much paying attention to the moment. They're focused a lot on destiny. They're focused a lot on just, again, the interconnectedness of everything. They're not so much focusing on the present. And the last little character I'll talk about before we kind of get into it with Brandon is a character from the expanded universe. Some people may not know of her. Her name is Verge. She was a weird bird creature. And she shows up in some of the later books in the New Jedi Order series. And she was a strange little thing. She turns out, when you find out a little bit about her backstory, she used to be a Jedi. She got captured by this species that tortured her. So she kind of gave up the Jedi ways. And in a lot of ways, she kind of became a gray Jedi. She was neither light or dark. She kind of followed it all. And she was the one who tutored a character by the name of Jason Solo and kind of really opens his mind to what the Force really is, as opposed to these very dogmatic views that were held by the Jedi or the Sith. So with all that in mind, we're going to have a conversation here with Brandon. We're going to talk about how in real life the unifying force, maybe it's called something else, but it in a lot of ways it exists. So we'll go from there.
Yeah, no, I love it. I know of a lot of, the Star Wars, right? Like, how can you not, kind of growing up? And I think I've only watched all of them, at least once. Was the Great Jedi? Was that girl? Was she in like the solo episode? Which one was she in? Any of the
Oh,
episodes, or
she
she was
wasn't.
just
No,
books?
she was purely in the books. Verge was purely in the books. I don't know if they'll ever bring her in. They've never shown her species. Again, she's a weird looking bird creature.
Mm,
She was really interesting. She was kind of a divisive figure for the fans. Some really loved her, some hated her because they couldn't figure out was she good or bad. But that was the whole damn
sure.
point.
Yeah, yeah. No, like right, and it's funny. I'm sure that as you kind of come along in the space and created your podcast, and you've had to do some of the marketing study, and you're supposed to pick a niche, and when you pick a niche, you're also supposed to be polarizing, right? It's like I don't, and you get to a point, I think, in life where you don't, I know I don't care that much anymore. It's like I don't, it's like it's not worth it. It's like I don't take a polarizing view because I can see both sides of it, right? And it's like I think to your point too earlier, it's like, the force is the force to on either side there's, they're polar opposites, right? Which is why they call it, polarizing, but it's all part of the same piece. So on one end, you've got a varying degree versus the other end, and it all depends on kind of which side of that you stand on. It's going to determine whether or not you determine that's good or bad. Also makes me think of too the Shakespeare line, which I also heard a ton from Bob Proctor whenever I was listening to him, was nothing is good or bad, but our thinking makes it so. Right? It's just it's
Absolutely.
literally just our thinking that kind of does this transmutation of whatever is in front of us, right? Or we can have a shitty thought, and we can I think I was listening to you and Adam, and you were talking about the whole idea of we get to where we are today, and we take all of our shitty experiences and we transform those into gold somehow,
Yeah.
right? We try, so we even if it seems like it's something tragic and shitty at the time, we look back later and be like, oh wow, you know what, I can actually apply this somewhere in my life for like really really great purpose and benefit to others, right? So just because it looks that way at one end at one time doesn't mean that it's gonna be that outcome, right? We don't know what that outcome's gonna be.
Correct.
And
We
then
do. You're right. Absolutely right. We don't. And and I was just kind of thinking of what you were talking about there, because you were talking about how our thoughts really do kind of, I mean, I've always said that our perception creates our reality. And to get to stay on the theme of the unifying force, that can be really problematic for a lot of people because, I mean, without getting political, I mean, look at political divisiveness in this country, look at wars and stuff that are happening even just across the world. I mean, instead of to cross fandoms here, in Star Trek, the whole point was that humans got to a point where they realized that all this energy they were expending fighting each other could be used for bettering civilization. And yeah, maybe that's an idealistic outlook, but in a way, I mean, we are all one people. We all are in this experience together. We all are connected, but it seems like we instead put up these dividers. We pick one end of this spectrum as opposed to identifying that the experience itself is a spectrum. We instead pick a little piece of that and we say, this is real. This
well,
is what it's all about.
Tony, that's what makes me special, Tony. That's what makes me special, and that's what makes you not special, and that's why we got to fight. Right? I mean, that's pretty much it, right? I've picked this one thing to focus on that I'm good at, makes sense to me. This is the only way the universe makes sense to me. And since I figured that out, since I discovered it, I must share this one way that the universe must work because it makes sense to me in this way. And if you don't believe that, then you're against me.
Yeah, and it breaks my heart like every day when I see this stuff, because the only way, in my opinion, the only way to reach enlightenment is to really expose yourself to conversations, oftentimes uncomfortable ones. Challenge your own belief system. You're never going to grow in a mental aspect or a spiritual aspect if you don't challenge what you believe.
It's really interesting, right? I want to hit on one more thing. Yes and no, right? But the other piece I wanted to hit on this before I let it all go, right? The force, what was it? The force was an ends to a mean versus the ends, right? Is
Yes.
what you were saying. The same thing that you're talking about here with war and peace, right? It's the same outcome. The same desired outcome is to end, the destruction, the dismay, and all the other stuff. But it's how we get there that's different, right? It's how we say that this is how we get there. You got one side that says, I'm gonna crush everybody until they are subservient and there's nobody left to stand against us, so that everybody agrees with what I'm saying. Or, the other end of it is, at the end we all kind of figure out, a little bit about what we're talking about here is that, yeah, look, we all come from kind of the same, we not even kind of come from the same, we all come from the same place. The thing that lights us inside, that makes you live and breathe, Tony, is the exact same thing inside of me, making me live. That's the exact same thing that's making the grass outside live. It's the exact same thing that's making my dog, right? My wife, children, anything that's alive, even inanimate. It's all made up of, essentially, we're all made of stardust, right? We're all made from the
Yep.
same thing. And even if we, go a little bit deeper than that, like, I don't know names of theories or any of that other stuff, but they say, one of the theories is that at one point, the universe was like the size of a pea, all blown up. If you take atoms right now and you look at them, you do a deep inspection on the atom, it's 99% space. You and I are like 99% space.
Yep. That's what they say.
Blows my
They
mind.
say the amount
Yeah.
of distance between the particles inside of an atom is just vast. It blow your mind, because you wouldn't think of it, because obviously we think of solid matter. We touch ourselves, we're solid. We don't
Right.
realize. Yeah. And
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 it's all still connected in some way, right? Like, it's all still connected from that little pea shape. We're all still, the cells, whatever, the atoms get reused. I think there's even like somebody saying, uh, if Jesus and Buddha were real people, then there's probably atoms of them within us, right? So we're all connected. We're all recycled, like the bodies are, at least, anyways, and the life force energy, all 100% same connected. When we go back in like to a a recycle pool, right?
yeah.
It's like energy soup, right? We're just a ladle, into this vessel, and it's like, all right, here's some energy soup. Go, go around in this bodysuit for a while and see what that's like.
I agree with you. I agree with you. And to me, I've always found it interesting that I've kind of expanded my own belief, like, because to me, I mean, it's very indicative of this whole gray path idea. Is, for me, I don't really particularly prescribe to any one viewpoint. I kind of just hear them all out and I pick and choose. And I know, just from talking with Jeremy and from snooping on your Facebook, you are a fellow martial artist. You're a jits guy like me.
Yeah,
So,
are you in
so
jiu-jitsu? That's
oh
right, I was
yeah,
gonna bring that up. Yeah, yeah, good
yeah,
move.
jits, Muay Thai, judo. Judo was my first love, and then kind of went from there. So it's the same concept. I mean, it's what Bruce Lee always said. You kind of absorb it all. You look at it all. You don't
Mhm.
have to make it your own. You take it all in. You pick the pieces that work for you, and and to me, I've done that with Well, I used to call myself an atheist. I definitely realize I'm more spiritual. I'm prescribed to more of that force theory. I definitely feel that there's some sort of energy field, whatever you want to call it. There's definitely something. I don't believe in a deity. I'd be more inclined to believe in polytheism than monotheism.
So
Um,
here's how I usually break it down. And I usually, like, part of what I share out is this design, like I call it like the divine framework, right? And even before we do that, like, there's two pieces: either everything is God or nothing's God. Just like Einstein said, either everything's a miracle or nothing's a miracle, right? And then if we just go ahead and we say, hey, look, we have a one in, I believe, 400 trillion chance in being born. 1 in 400 trillion chance. If that's not a miracle, I don't know what is, right? But essentially what it boils down to is that you make the decision, right? You say, all right, I believe in this higher power, or I don't, right? But here's what you can do. It's kind of like, with the higher power, with the acceptance of a higher power, with even thinking there's a higher power. I also it's like that higher power could be as simple as the 95% of your brain or whatever that you're not using, right? That higher power could be the thing that makes your blood, right? Do you know how you do that, Tony?
Yeah. No, I have
Do you,
no
I mean, do
idea.
you have any idea how you do that? Right, right.
Nope,
But you're
not a
doing
clue.
it.
Yep,
Do you
I'm
know how?
doing
Do
it.
you know how to grow hair?
Yeah.
I mean,
I
right.
skipped
I mean,
that
that's pretty
lesson.
cool. But you're doing it, right? So I mean, these are some things that you're already doing, and you don't know how you're doing them. That are pretty miraculous. But imagine what else you could do, like if you just kind of let some things go and just started doing it, right? I think I heard you and Adam talking a little bit about this. Is like, and just like with your podcast, once you decide to start taking some action on that, right, and just like leaning into it, things are going to start opening up for you in ways that you know not of. And who else? The Bible says that he had ways you knew not of, right? You're like, what? I don't know how this is all going to work, but it's going to work, right? And so allowing, whether it's your subconscious that does it, or which is a higher power in of itself, because you don't know what it is, you don't know how to use it. Well, you can train yourself how to use it. Um, and leveraging it in a way that's like essentially divine or otherworldly, because you're like, I didn't know I could do some of this stuff. I didn't know life could be this liberating and life would open up for me in just such a way. Why wouldn't you? Like, right? Like, I mean, or you can keep doing it the way you've been doing it by yourself. And if that's been working out for you and you're happy with the results, then continue to do that. Right. But it's like, I didn't come across, like you, man. Like, I'm not like, I'm not a God, Jesus, anything kind of guy. But like when you start like just pulling out the principles of what they were saying and applying it in your life, you're like, holy shit, these guys might have been on to something. And you know what? Things that last for thousands of years usually don't last for thousands of years unless they kind of work.
Correct. They can't be
Right.
completely full of shit.
Right. Right. So there might be something to what they are saying in all of that. Right. So um like I don't even know what an atheist is. I would literally have to Google it, and I don't,
I
you
guess
know,
to me, I consider myself an atheist for so long because I was an atheist in the sense that I didn't buy conventional religion. And I
yeah.
think that's what most people who call themselves an atheist would have to be, because to it would have to just be a rejection of conventional religion, because otherwise it's a nihilist, and the nihilist doesn't exist because a nihilist believes in nothing, but the belief in nothing is a belief in something, and therefore a nihilist cannot exist.
So I'm literally Googling it since we're doing
Yeah.
it. We're here now, right? An atheist is a person who disbelieves or lacks belief in the existence of God or gods. And when you say gods, I would literally just say like a higher power, right?
Yeah.
A universe. I mean, you believe in somewhat like the force, right? And here's what happens. Here's what I believe happens. We grow up in this. We grow up in this. The Bible. We grow up surrounded by Jesus in the West, wherever we are, most of us. And we keep hearing a bunch of this stuff and we reject it, right? We reject it. We just were like, that doesn't make any sense. It can't be, it doesn't work that way. Right. And so then we're like, we're older, we're moving along, we're cruising. And then somebody brings up like yoga. We're like, I might check that out. Yoga might be cool. Or even like jujitsu, right? Like our Eastern philosophy, like Bruce Lee kicked a lot of ass. I like to kick ass. Let's go do that. And then like you start hearing these other newer principles, right? Like I love Jiu Jitsu because like it teaches you how to like everybody starts off in the same place. Everybody comes in as a white belt, bro. Right?
Yep. And then they
Nobody
leave
comes.
as a blue belt. You never see him again.
Yeah, mine's in the background, but I'm definitely I keep going. I'm making sure I get to the next level, 100%. So nobody starts off greater than y'all. Y'all start off in the same place, and in a good place, you all are working together towards a common goal, and that's the improvement of yourself and the others around you, right?
Absolutely. Because if you, yeah, I'm glad. Well,
'Cause-
you get it. Like, you can't be
yeah,
a dick.
well,
You got to
if you don't, you'll
roll.
get your ass kicked,
Well, get your ass
right?
kicked,
Like
or no one's just going to fucking train with you.
that's it,
Like,
right? Like, yeah, I mean, I knew a black belt that everybody hated. I was like, wow, that kind of sucks, dude. Like, I would hate to get to that level and everybody like thinks you're a dick, right?
yeah.
Like, I mean, because that means you haven't contributed, right? That
Yep.
means that you've gotten to that level and you haven't contributed to the whole piece. So I love how like there's like this camaraderie, right? And then there's also the whole sense of like flow or
Yes.
that you get into, and like when you start learning and applying these techniques in like just the right way, you're connecting mind, body, and spirit, right? Like at the
Yes.
same time, you're like, it's almost like the Matrix, like where everything just kind of slows down and you're just seeing it all happen before your eyes. You're like, what? How does this even happening?
Yep.
Um, but I don't know where I was going with that, man. I just love jujitsu.
Oh no, I'm with you. I
Oh,
was actually going to bring it up too because you're right. The flow of jujitsu is such a perfect encapsulation of the concept of interconnectedness. Because
mm,
so for any of my listeners who have not, I guess I should chime in here. So jujitsu is it's a Japanese martial art. It's primarily grappling. There are some takedowns in it, but it's primarily grappling on the ground. Focuses on a lot of joint locks. Attacking heels, knees, wrists, elbows, necks, body cranks, stuff like that. For people who don't, if you know anything about the UFC, pretty much when it hits the ground in the UFC, you're either seeing wrestling or you're seeing jujitsu. If you don't know anything about martial arts, it's going to look like a bunch of grown people just in pajamas rolling around on the ground. But for anyone who's competed in it or anyone who's trained it, it's kind of like human chess. When Brandon said flow, that's probably the biggest, it's the hardest lesson for any newbie to learn. Every newbie, when they step on the mat, goes in there super tense and super aggressive. Everybody does. And then after getting your ass tapped 50 times, then you start to realize, okay, I need to calm down. And that's when you hit flow. And flow is amazing because flowing is literally they're pushing, you're pulling. They're pulling, you're pushing. They're moving one way, you're moving another. And it's like two bodies in a way become one. And it's this integral chess match where, I mean, I don't know about you. I never really know how it's going to end until
well, I
it
mean,
does.
the deal is right. In this kind of state of flow, like both of you theoretically are of similar levels, or the higher levels kind of letting you move around too, and navigate. For each position there is there's a move for that, right? It's like
Yep.
it's like an iPhone. There's a move, there's an app for that, right? So it's like there and there's also an escape from that, right? And it's like just in the flow state of flow rolling anyways. That's the two of you are just letting each other work, right? It's not like to combat each other. It's a state of competition where the competition is two people who are equals that are trying to make each other better.
That's perfectly, yep, that's 100% correct. Because when you flow, even if you hit a lock, you don't really hit a lock. It's more just like you got it, you flow on to the next one. No
Yeah,
one's
yeah,
really in there to win. And it's
right.
a hard thing to find. And I live in a small area, and I'll tell you, like, I've been training a long time. There's only a small handful of people I know who are capable of flowing because you get hyper competitive people, you get, you get people who can't reach that state sometimes. But if it is
Well,
a
let's be fair. Let's be fair, man. Like, how many times you gone into a match with another one of your guys or girls, and you're like, all right, we're just gonna flow, and 3 minutes later, you're choking each other out, right? You're just like,
96% of the time, I'm
which
not
is
gonna lie,
which
96%
is
of the time.
which is straight fun. Which is straight fun. We definitely we're definitely diverted though from I think where we're going.
Yes.
So if we're gonna turn it back around, where we jump back in at?
So as we turn around, we turn it back in. I want to talk about how we can apply this concept of connectedness into our everyday life, how we can use it to handle things like stress, depression, suicide, a lot of those big, heavy topics, because there's lots of use when you start realizing how everything is kind of drawn together.
Well, I think that there's a lot of different ways, right? One of the first things that kind of jumps out at me is loving your neighbor as yourself, right? Um, and one of the things that you got to do first is be able to love yourself first, right? Like, how much do you actually love yourself, right? And then you also have to realize that everybody that you see out there is a reflection of who you are. And then if you can love your neighbor as yourself, then you're seeing yourself quite literally, right? And acting as if it's a full-on connection. I mean, like, you really you can look at it a couple different ways. If you feel like being super altruistic and this person that's all of service, that's great. But I really still think, I'm sure there's people out there that are better than me that they really are. But if you can't get yourself to that point, what you can do is just be like, that's just me treating myself well, right? And that can take out a lot of. So that's one application of some of the stuff that we hear about. Like, well, I love my neighbors myself, but he keeps taking all my shit, right? Like, all right, well, you gotta figure out kind of, again, whatever you're seeing out there is a reflection of what's in your mind. That's your pre-programming. That's what you set up to see. That's your ABC, ESPN, whatever. That's the channel you've tuned into. Adam and you guys talked about that a little bit, right? Um, and then in terms of how to leverage and deal with the anxiety, leveraging spirituality, a couple different ways to do that. I'm gonna go back to what I was talking about earlier, which was the idea of maybe, maybe as the Hindus say, and a lot of other people say, maybe we are all God as individuals. We're God acting out our parts, and we're playing it so well that we've forgotten that we're God, right? And or again, either everything's God or nothing's God. So if you see something as God, then you're God, right? You're included in that. You're included in that mix. That being said, if that's tough to digest, go ahead and say, hey, my 95% of my my subconscious is like the higher sense of self. And a lot of times, when you think about the idea of let go and let God, or handing your worries over to God, you're like, okay, I don't accept God. I don't accept the higher power. I don't accept, like, universal source and the vortex, bro. Then one of the things you can accept is, all right, what if I toss this problem over to the same thing that grows my hair, pumps my blood, breathes my lungs, that I trust with my life explicitly because it
It
keeps
runs
me
your
alive.
life.
It actually keeps doing it, right? And the thing is that it's going to take practice to do that. But the first time you're saying it to yourself, and you're in a panic and you're worried, and you also have to understand that on your frontal lobe, you can only keep like four things kind of at focus at any given time, right? With your prefrontal. And then to try to do that, and then like you start to get anxious because there's a lot of pressure. It takes up like a lot of power, right? And then you just say, all right, you know what? And it only computes at, like, I don't know, XYZ bits, whereas like your subconscious is like this ultra mega supercomputer that's doing trillions of calculations and whatnot per second, right? So you're like, all right, well, I'll just toss whatever this problem is over to that, right? Like, I mean, the problem may be big, but I don't know. Um, but if you can't solve it right now, and if you can't toss it over to God, then toss it over to your subconscious. Be like, all right, I'm gonna toss it over to my subconscious. It it's doing a lot for me. I'm pretty sure it can do this. And usually you give it like a couple days, a few days, and you leave yourself open to the possibility that there's a solution that I know not of, right? That you don't know of. But now that you've tossed it into your subconscious, you've now said to your subconscious, I believe that there is something, a way for this to work out for me, and I'm open to it. I don't know what it is. And your subconscious now like acts literally like Google, and it's all like, it's just nonstop. Everything that you see, it's like dumping into the algorithm, and is like, oh, that's a fix for my problem. That's not a fix for my problem. That's a fix for my problem. That's the solution. That's not the solution. How could this, And at some point, you're gonna look over and you're gonna see, like, I don't know, anything really. You'd be like, oh, there's the screwdriver thing I've been looking for like a month, and it's like right there to your left, right? So that's one way you can begin to eliminate some of your anxiety by saying, all right, I'm gonna let this go to something greater than I'm used to leveraging, and I'm gonna let it just kind of work on its own. And you'll see that that'll start to work. So what I recommend to most people is start off with something really small, right? Because I don't know, it's hard to believe in something really large if you don't believe in any of this at all. So baby steps, right? Baby steps, again, just like jujitsu, right?
Yep.
Small stuff. You're like, I can't believe I was able to do that. Oh my God, look at me, I'm awesome. But you can do that with your subconscious. This is how you begin to train your subconscious, and you start to leverage your subconscious, or the higher power, whatever you want to call it. But you can begin to just kind of relax a little bit. Like, you're like, I'm not. You'll be sitting there in your car and be like, there's no way I'm going to solve this right now. I don't know how this is going to work. Something will figure out. I'm still alive. Every choice I've made up to this point so far has like worked out. I'm pretty sure going forward, something will work out. Right. So that's and the first time I really discovered that and landed on it and just felt it working was through listening to Florence Scovel Shinn, who was a new age person from like the 40s. Great stuff. She's got a book called The Game of Life and How to Play It. She's, metaphysics and whatnot, new agey. And I was listening to a lot of her and her books and Neville Goddard. And I kind of combined it and just kind of landed in that space. And man, ever since then, I'd already been a pretty calm dude. Like I'd already been okay, but this like took it to a whole nother level. I mean, this I literally felt like weight sloughing off of me, man. It was like I could feel it. So there's that, right? If you just need to go all spiritual on it.
So hold on, just apologize here. I just want to jump in because I'm making some notes here. So I actually want to go back real quick to the subconscious training because you're the first person I've ever heard call it that. I'd never heard the term training your subconscious, but to maybe help some of my listeners out, I'm going to tell a little story about personally myself because apparently that's what I've been doing my entire life is training my subconscious. So for anyone listening, I imagine you probably have a very strong imagination if you've taken a liking to the show because we talk about a lot of stuff that uses your imagination. For me, I've explained this to my best friend Lance, who I met through Jiu Jitsu. I have what I refer to as the man in the room. And I came up with this visualization in my head from the movie version of the Stephen King book Dreamcatcher. If you've ever seen the movie, they all gain psychic powers in there, but the one talks about how he keeps a library in his brain. And if he learns something new, once it's a capacity, he has to go and burn some other stuff. So I've always kind of had that weird mental image in my head of like an old study. Well, in the center of the old study is a man who sits at a desk, and he's the man in the room. And my whole life, the man in the room has sent me reports. And what it is it's literally what you were talking about. I will hear things, absorb things that I'm not consciously hearing or acknowledging. And then I will get these reports, which and Adam and I touched upon this a little bit in our episode, but I think it makes a little more sense in this episode is I get what I call, force sensitivity or my spidey sense. These reports come and they appear as strange solutions or ideas that 9 times out of 10 become integral to my life. Whether it's figuring out a problem that I didn't know I had, whether it's coming up with something like this podcast, whether it's really any major movement in my life, it's all come from reports from the man in the room. If I have relationship problems, and it's weird because I've come to rely on the man in the room. I don't know what he does. I don't know how he does it, but I know that when I am met with a difficulty, I kind of surrender in a lot of ways and I take that stress off myself. I stop saying, how the fuck am I going to make this work? Case in point, perfect example of it, something anyone can relate to. So we're going into September now. So November of last year, I got news that my largest client was just not sending me work anymore. So it was like I lost a third of my income, like overnight, just like a fart in the wind disappeared. And I didn't know what the fuck I was going to do. And for weeks, I stressed, like just stressed to the max. I didn't talk to anybody about it because I didn't want to be viewed as a failure. And I just stressed and I stressed and I stressed. And then at one point, I finally was just like, you know what, Tony, you have been through shit your whole fucking life. None of that fucking beat you. So I just let it go. I was like, you know what? The man in the room is going to figure it out. And I'll be damned if a solution didn't present itself a week later. And now I make more money than I ever did. And it's crazy. And I know it sounds hokey, but I've tried to explain this to other people. We all have the man in the room. The big difference is most of us fucking ignore him.
Well, there's a couple things, and I love it. Right, you have found a system that works for you. Right. Remember, I went back earlier. I'm like, this is how I figured out the universe. This is how I make it work. Now you guys go do it. Right. So everybody figures that something out on their own. It's kind of like their own system. It's a lot like Hinduism, Vedanta talks. Just talks a little bit about like, there's an oak and there's a flower. right? Like and a lily, right? There's an oak and a lily. They're both blossoming. They're both giving to the world, but they're doing it in ways that they do it. Period. And neither one of them's wrong in the way that they do it. So, Tony, in this episode, you're the lily.
I'm cool with that.
No, so I was running around and be like, from oh geez, what's it called? Bambi. You can call me flower if you want to, right? But blossoming, right? And in a way that in a way that only in a way that only that thing can. That's its life's expression. That's how it expresses its life, and that's how like I also look at it in terms of wine, right? Are you a fan of wine?
No, I'm not much of a drinker.
Yeah, I don't drink anymore either. But so the deal is though, is that each grape in each different territory during each different year has a different outcome.
Hmm.
Right. So, I mean, if I'm growing grapes in Chile and it's been an extremely warm year, the person who's a wine connoisseur can tell you like that it was a warm year for that grape. It can tell by like what happened. So, real similar to your story and Adam's story. And, we can get to these different outcomes, and how we blossom and how we express ourselves tells a lot about where we came from, what years did we experience, right? Like, you're talking like later model Star Wars, right? And so I'm like, he's a little bit younger than me, but like I still understand what he's saying, type of thing, right? But you're expressing yourself in a different way that only you could express yourself at the time, place, and scenes that you were born, right? So I always think that that's interesting. So hopefully that's helpful
Oh
in
no,
some
and
way.
that's kind of the whole point of this podcast too, is trying to bring people like me who maybe, well, I mean, I have a degree in philosophy, so I've always been kind of drawn to those kind of ideas, but I'm really trying to reach out to those people that are really into things like just fandoms in general, whether it be Star Wars, Marvel, Harry Potter, whatever. I mean, we're all geeks about something. My goal is to try to use a language they understand, to
100%.
try to Sherpa them to this so they can figure it out. They
Yeah,
can
yeah.
get up their own enlightenment by maybe taking some concepts that perhaps they knew, but they didn't know they knew, by using a
Well,
language
yeah,
they understand.
yeah. Well, I think, and the other piece that you brought up too, right, was this whole idea of like, oh man, I'm freaking out, right? I'm freaking out. And the reason you're freaking out is because you think you need to come up with that solution.
Yep, exactly.
You think you need to come up with that solution. So think of like the whole idea of sticking your hand like in water, right? Like when you've got your hand in that water, like the water is never going to be able to flow into that space because you've got your hand in that water, right? Like that's the same way as like I've got to create this solution. So I've got to take up all this space and energy and resource because I'm the only one that can do it, right? And what you found though was as soon as you let that energy kind of go and took your hand out of that water, whatever you need came right in.
Yep.
Right. It's kind of like, it's also, the whole idea of like desperation. Like nobody likes a desperate person, right? Like when you're desperate, you're putting all this energy into something that you feel like you need it so bad. And it's like clingy, and even the universe is like, whoa, lean off, bro. Like, I mean, I got you, but like you got to stop calling me at like 2, and asking for all these things. It's just this, it's the whole idea of the asking it is given. But what you did, right, in your report situation, you leveraged, these are the people that are call themselves, they, rely on intuition. They call it tapping into the Akashic record. They call it like mediumship. Call it any number of these things. But in the end, it really comes down to kind of trusting yourself, right, and finding that, every religion will talk about it, tapping into that spark within, the divine within, and trusting yourself and becoming your own kind of guide and resource. I mean, the thing is that you'll find it gets validated as that's what you're finding for yourself right now. As you go out right now, Tony, you have these conversations, you're finding like, all right, I'm not crazy. People are like, they're not even like, they're not even shoving me away. They're bringing me in the door. They're sitting me down for a cup of coffee. Like, let's talk about this. I agree with what you're saying. I just want to understand more about how you're saying it, right? So it's like there's so many other people out there now that are open to this conversation, that are having this conversation, and it's just a different ways of going about it. And I love that you've got this idea of a dream catcher, the filing system. Like I remember, right? That's like he had like the filing system like
Yep, and
running
he was
around
taking
like
it
in the
to the
middle.
burner because he
Yeah.
like threw away lyrics from shit he remembered as a kid because he had to make room for physics or something.
Right, right. I mean, and the deal is like you never forget anything, right?
Nope.
You literally never forget anything. It's just like if your mind doesn't have a use for it, then it's not going to use it,
Yep, just
right?
files it away somewhere. I had
Right, 100%.
experienced it with a good friend of mine from college. Her name was Brenna. We were got a weird Facebook notification that was like, "Oh, you've been friends with Brenna for 6 years," and I was like, "Haha, I've been friends with her for like 15." I guess we were just only
Right.
Facebook friends for that long. And she had brought up a memory from I had completely forgot. I had completely forgot it was there. But she brought up a memory in a comment, and I was like, "Holy shit!" And it all just flooded right back.
Right.
And had she not said anything, who knows if I'd ever thought of that again, ever.
Triggers.
Yep.
Triggers, man.
But
Just
it's all
triggers,
it
right?
it's all in there.
It's all there.
Yeah, and another reference to what you're saying, I just thought it was kind of funny. So I was talking to one of my best friends, her name's Ashley. We were talking earlier today, and she used a term I never heard of. She said thirsty man. She's like, I can't stand a thirsty man. I'm like, the fuck does that even mean? Because
Yeah,
she's very much your basic white girl. So she was like Urban Dictionary it. So I went to the Urban Dictionary to look it up, and it was exactly what you were talking about. It's someone, when they get super desperate and they're just like hitting you up every 5 seconds.
yeah. But I mean that's what it is, right? We want these things so badly. We want these things so badly that we're willing to do anything except for take our time to get it.
Yep.
There's a story from a book called Are You Ready to Succeed? Which is written by Sri Kumar Rao, and a guy that I took his course, read the book like 4 or 5 times now. Really enjoy the content. The story is like you know, a young guy goes up to a monastery to a master and he goes, "Hey, master, I'd like you to admit me to school. If I come in here and work with you, how long is it going to take before I become a master myself?" And the master's like 10 years. He goes, "Wow, that's a real long time." He goes, "Well, what if I come in here and I work twice as hard, spend twice as much time doing all the things, and put double my efforts?" And he's like, "It's going to take you twice. It's going to take you 20 years. It's going to take you twice as long, right?" Um, just because of that exact same thing. You're putting so much into it. You're not allowing anything to kind of come back. You're not allowing anything to reciprocate and return.
Yeah, I mean it's that's probably one of the hardest lessons too, because I mean I've talked in some of my earlier episodes about how I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but I am an overachiever. I fit into that category. And one of the hardest things for anyone who's an overachiever is stillness, is
Mm,
waiting, is I'm a big note taker. I keep sticky notes everywhere. In my office, there's a sticky note that is to remind me of this. And the sticky note says, not every season is a harvest. And it's one
right.
of the hardest things to remember because sometimes you got to let the wheat grow. You've sowed
Yeah.
your seed and just let it do its thing.
100%, man. It knows what to do, right? And the same thing with your thoughts, and the same thing with like your ideas and anything else. As and the whole mustard seed thing. It knows what it's supposed to do, right? It knows exactly what it's supposed to. I always think that the funniest line is like we're us people seeds. We're the only ones that like we don't know what to do, right? We don't know exactly what we're saying. So it's frustrating because we want to flourish. We want to live in our purpose, and we want to contribute, and we um, want to be significant, and we don't realize that we already are.
Yep.
You
Yeah, I
know,
mean, it's because I think a lot of us, our classification system's all fucked up. We're working off of goalposts that we didn't set. We're running a race we one maybe don't even know we're in, and two, we're chasing goals that aren't our own. And I think that's a huge pitfall. I think that's where a lot of people kind of lose sight. I mean, Adam said it in the last episode where, if you don't start chasing your dreams, someone's going to hire you to create, or if you don't create
yeah,
your
yeah,
dreams,
yeah.
someone's,
If you're not chasing your dreams, you're chasing somebody else's or something like that. You're
yeah,
working, which is fine, right? Look, one of the other things that he brought up in that episode is that everybody has to go through a bunch of shit before they have like the breakthroughs. And that's the one thing I don't agree with. And I haven't agreed with that like for the longest time. Simply because of, again, how the universe worked for me. Right. Did I have challenges in my life? Yeah, kind of. Did I come from a lot of money? No, but like, was life ever really hard, man? No.
Hmm.
I mean, really, like it was no was there always food? Yeah, I always ate. Was I always clothed? Yeah, I always had clothes. Did I always have a place to sleep at night? Yeah, I always had a place to sleep at night. Was it like, in a mansion? Was it glorious? No, but like, was it hard? Did I have to trek across like from PA to California in a wagon, canvas covered wagon, you know, shooting off like wolves and Indians, man? No, I'm like, so life hasn't been hard now. And did I make life easy? I know I definitely like I fought a bunch. I fought against a lot of the things that like if somebody just like kind of sat down with me a little bit and like been like, you know what, you can make this really easy on yourself, and here's a couple ways you can make it easy on yourself, right? Um, that may have helped. It may not have, man. You don't know going back.
That's true.
Um, but in the same token, I don't believe that I ever hit like this space that was like and I talked to plenty of people on my podcast where they hit like this falling on the ground crying and woe is me, and um is this all that there is to life? What happened to me was like I got to a point where I was like, life has given me quite a bit, and I haven't even put any effort out yet. Like I haven't even tried, right? Like, I wonder what this might be like if I tried just a little bit, right? And that's where it actually started to get really frustrating. As a matter of fact, it started to get really frustrating when, I started to like put like massive amount of effort and into it, right? But then I also got to a same point like where you got to, where you just like where you stand back and you're just like, you know what, fuck it, whatever. The moment I stood back and said, yeah, fuck it, real similar to you, like, I ended up getting like an offer for double my pay, right? Like, and I was like, what? Shut up. You know what I mean? Like, this is not supposed to happen this way. So, and ever since then, like, there's been multiple instances of that where effort, and you could call that planting the seed. You can call it like, just stepping back and letting the harvest. You can call it anything that you want. The thing that matters is what I believe
Yeah,
in.
exactly. It really only
Right,
matters. It's your path, as I use my
right,
phrase. It's your path, so it only
right.
fucking matters that you're on your path and it's working for you.
That's it, man. Right. Like, and so every time, I mean, I've got really cool things in the pipeline right now that like just I could have never imagined happening the way that they are and have before. My podcast, I'm on my third one. It's called Spiritual Dope. It's 100% in alignment with who I am. I've had since like day one of kind of sending that out, actors, Emmy award winning actors reaching out to me to be on
That's
the
crazy.
podcast.
That's
I'm like,
amazing.
huh? I'm like, so what made you feel like you were a good fit? I'm super glad to have you, but like, how could I have more of you? And even, I talked about Sri Kumar Rao, who's this guy that I've been reading, watched his TED talk 4 years ago, bought his book. His book sat next to my desk for like, a year because you read the beginning of the book. It was like, you got to do it like this. I was like, well, I'm just not taking that time right now. Right. And
Exactly. It's like, okay,
and
I see what you're saying, but no.
now's not the time for me. And then, picked up, 4 years later, I ended up like picking up the phone and just saying, hey, real similar to you calling Jeremy. I realized that his coordinator was calling from a 215 area code, which is up out here by Philadelphia, and I was living outside. I was like, fuck it, I'm calling. I was like, I'm picking up the phone, I'm calling, I'm seeing if I can get him on the podcast, right? Well, I had a great conversation with Jackie, and she's like, let me see, I think that he should be on your podcast. And he was on my podcast. I was like blown away. Like, I didn't really know what to say. I got, I definitely got like fanboyed on him. And like, he kind of, but he goes, and even before he started, he goes, listen, I get thousands of requests a day. And I'm like, and you're showing up on my podcast. So like, it's just, blows my mind. Who else did I have on recently? It was like Eric Neese from Real World, from MTV, just like, it's just like,
Yeah, it's
It's
insanity.
it's
When you just
amazing the
sit
people
back
that you
and
get
you're
to
like,
connect
holy
to.
shit, like, yeah, it's like like this is real. I mean,
Yeah.
and I said the same thing to Adam, and I'll repeat it to you because it's true. It's just it's funny to me, according to Buzzsprout, I think I passed the 60-day mark. If so, I'm like right around 60 days that I've been running, and it's crazy because so 90 days ago I came up with the idea of this. 90 days, here I am. I mean, I was listening to you. You were a disembodied voice on the radio. Adam was a disembodied voice. Jeremy was a
Right.
disembodied voice.
Yeah.
And now it's like, holy shit, I'm starting to tap into this community. And I mean, it's amazing. It's absolutely phenomenal. I'm loving the fact that I'm reaching out to people. I actually had I need to sit down and read it. I had my first quote unquote fan, I guess you could say. I got a
Nice.
message of, this girl who was like, hey, I wrote this treatise, a retelling of the Final Fantasy VII story, but I wrote it with a strong philosophical undertone. And I was like, hmm. And she's like, is that something you're in? And I'm like, that's 100% something I'd be interested in reading. So I got to
Sure.
sit down and read it. And, but if it's good, I'm going to ask her to come on the show. And it's really cool. And of course, I have my list of people that I really, really want to reach out to. And of course, there's always that same fear that like, oh, why the fuck would they ever pay attention to me? Like there's an episode, I'm looking back here in my little book where I have all my episode ideas planned out. And I have one I've been sitting on now for a month. And it's I can't remember the actor's name, but it's from the show Parks and Rec. I don't know if you ever watched it. Um
Yeah.
yeah,
Dwight.
I want to do it. I want to do an episode on Jerry Gergich, and I
Okay.
want to center it on Jerry Gergich and the concept of self-love and acceptance. And
Yeah.
I would love to see if I could reach out to the actor who played Jerry Gergich because he seems like just such a nice guy. I think it'd be amazing to have him on to do the episode. But I'm just still sitting in that fear center where it's like, who the hell is going to give little old me and my baby podcast the time of day?
You never know. I mean, it all depends on how you position it, right? I mean, it sounds like you're in a little bit of sales kind of role.
Yeah, my dad was I have a natural salesman's blood.
Right.
So
So, but I mean, yeah, position it where, say exactly what you just said, right? Like, I think that you'd be a great fit for this. I'd love to explore it with you. Or is that something that you're open to?
yeah.
Right. I
Um
mean,
I
and
mean,
tell them, yeah, you know what I did too. I mean, and we're here we are on the show, but like, give them like, maybe a shorter time frame. Be like, it'd only be a half hour,
yeah.
right? I just want to, do a mini cast on you if you're open to it.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a little note there. All right, so I wanted to get in a couple other things, but I think we will save that for potentially a future episode.
Sure.
But so I'm gonna ask you the same two questions I kind of ask everybody, just because it kind of fits with the underlying theme of my podcast. So the first one is, so you yourself, if you had the ability to go back in time and talk to a younger version of Brandon who was going through a rough patch, whatever that rough patch is for you, what would you say to him and why?
I I, I kind of chuckled to myself earlier because I heard you ask Adam. I'd probably tell myself to buy Bitcoin and sell at 60. Um, I mean, right? The guy and like or be the guy that took it for the pizzas, right?
Oh God, and he
But I
has
would
no
definitely,
shame.
when it was at like $6, I mean, I probably that's it. So buy Bitcoin and hold until 60.
And then, of course, my other question, which we've all kind of started to get a good answer of this, but what do you see? And it's great because you really, I mean, you call it your own thing, but you really do prescribe to your own great path. I mean, what is Brandon's great path as you see it? What is your path through life?
Look, it's still opening, right? I haven't. If I had an answer, then you know, then I might be at the end already. I'd be terrified to have the answer, I think, almost, right? There's a guy named Theodore Nottingham who does a really great the Gospel of Thomas. I mean, this guy, like, he just nails it. It is wonderful. Even if you're not into that shit, like, you gotta check it out. And he's talking like some guy's talking to Jesus, and he's like, what will we know when we get to the end? And Jesus is like, do you know the beginning so that you know the end? And the answer is no, right? Like, I mean, I don't know, man. Like, my path right now is, just to stay open to it. It's to continue to learn, continue to develop this strength and belief in who I am, and to continue beyond to continue beyond courage. And you know, so I'm holding up a book here. It's called Letting Go: Pathway of Surrender by David Hawkins. And I'm only holding it because it's just right next to me. And David Hawkins has this. I'm trying to find the um, map of consciousness that he came up with. And so the map of consciousness, um, and when I say courage, like continue through courage, right? Because everything in the consciousness levels and where you are beneath courage is kind of what keeps you stunts your growth, right? And it's once you come into courage, just like you yourself have in firing up the podcast, right? That moment's courage where you're like, I'm sending them out, man. I'm sending them out. And like you just like you press the send button, you walk away and nothing explodes. You're like, I guess it's gonna work, man. This is gonna be pretty cool. Right. And then, you know, each time you get your next guest on, each time you have somebody reaching out to you with the treaties, each time you have somebody saying, yeah, I'll do that, each time somebody's like, that was awesome, like that continues to encourage you, build your courage. And so you get to a state of he walks you up past courage, you get into neutrality, willingness, acceptance, reason, and love is at 500 on this map of consciousness, and realize that it's a logarithmic scale. And then there's this other girl who took this scale and created a program called Love or Above. So above love is joy, peace, and finally enlightenment. So where that's my path, right? I'm working my way forward through those things. I'm doing the best I can. You know, I've got my my two children and my wife, where we work on a lot of this together in our own different ways too. You know, my wife does it in a way that only she can do it. My children do it in the only way that they can do it. And we all, work to encourage each other and cultivate that sense of you should trust what your gut is telling you. You should trust your intuition. And how can I help you lead? You know, how can I help you to that place, right? What can I do to help you to get there? And that's what I do at home. That's what I do at work. That's what I do in the community, as a coach, as a podcaster, as any of it, right? That's the best answer I got, man.
Dude, that's an awesome purpose. I mean, especially when someone's path includes helping of others, to me that's always a good solid path to be on, because if you're being of service to others, in a lot of ways you're being of service to yourself. I mean, I'm a firm believer, without going on another tangent, I'm a firm believer that there's literally no such thing as a selfless act. Everything that we do is selfish by nature, but that does
100%.
not,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean it's bad.
Right.
I run into a lot of problems with people who can't differentiate the term selfish from bad. Selfish does
Mm,
not mean bad. Everything we do is selfish, but we can do great things for selfish reasons. I mean, we
100%,
can.
man.
So anyway, where can everybody find you? I mean, obviously we
Spirit,
know Spiritual Dope.
yeah, man. Yeah. Spiritualdope.co should have my links to Instagram, Facebook, and the podcast platforms.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I mean, honestly, man, thanks for taking the time out of your night for doing this. Hopefully we can do something again in the future. Probably hit you up here in a couple months to do an episode on force sensitivity. It was the one thing I was going to dig into, but we had such a great conversation, I didn't want to deviate. I think that'd be a great one to have sometime. Just really talk about what it's like in real life to kind of have that. So anyway, for everybody out there who's interested, this episode is going to go live next Monday. So we're recording this on the 21st. It'll go off next Monday as our mandatory Monday episode. And just lots of stuff in the works. This upcoming Sunday, I'll be recording the PTSD episode. So I'm bringing on a veteran. We're going to talk about how tabletop gaming, D&D specifically, has helped him in dealing with PTSD. I think that's going to be a really fun episode, really useful for a lot of people. So as always, everybody, I'm your host, Tony B, and you be safe out there.